Hello. Today, we, you and me, are going to talk about IT band syndrome. Buckle up. The IT band, or the IT tract, runs from here-ish to here-ish. It's pretty thick here. It's a tendon, and it runs pretty thick, and then it goes down to the knee. When we have IT band syndrome, we normally feel it here. So what I want to talk about is, one, how to help get rid of IT band syndrome, and two, things that you probably want to avoid in conjunction with IT band syndrome. Let's do this. Most of the people that get IT band syndrome are people that make the same repetitive motion over and over, cycling, running, that kind of thing. It can also occur if you sit for a long period of time in the same position. Your knee, the outside of your knees can start to hurt. It can also happen if you don't warm up and you start a new exercise. So warm up before you work out. Okay. How do you know if you have IT band syndrome? Symptoms. Jesus, Katie. How am I supposed to work like this? Let's go back to symptoms. There'll be a stabbing pain on the outside of your knee. You might feel a snapping sensation as you straighten your knee from the bending position. There might be swelling on the outside of your knee, or there might be pain after the activity itself. If you have IT band syndrome, it can start down by the knee, but it can travel all the way up the tendon up into your hip. So if you don't take care of it, obviously it'll get it worse, like everything else. Basic treatment that people always suggest: rest, ice, compression, and elevation, always good options. You can also take anti-inflammatory drugs to help with the pain, to help with the inflammation in the knee. I can't believe my dog is still playing with this toy right now. I've already gone onto my soapbox about anti-inflammatory drugs, so you do you. Okay, so with IT band syndrome, there's a couple of things. Yes, you can stretch it out, good maintenance stretching. A lot of PTs will probably argue that you can't stretch the IT band, and I get it, but for the sake of simplicity and for basic stretching, I'm gonna say that you can. But really what we wanna do is strengthen the problem area, or really address the problem area. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, so stay with me. The IT band runs along the middle of your leg, right? Kind of where your pant seam is. But if you look at the hip, you have the TFL, which is around the front, and I'll put a picture here. And then you have the glute med. And the TFL runs pretty vertically to the IT band, and the glute med runs diagonally, right? The fibers of the muscles. So what happens is you have a really tight TFL. It's taking up all of the work for a weak glute med and all kinds of stuff. And those fibers, like I said, are running up and down along with the IT band. So they're kind of running like this. And the tighter the TFL, all of that force is being put down at the distal portion of the IT band. Sorry, my dog is being obnoxious. So the fibers are running down, they're pulling up on that leg, right? So if you get something that's tight and pulling at the top, the bottom is gonna pull too. It's basic understanding of physics, right? If I pull my right hand, my left thumb is gonna wanna go with it. It's the same thing. If the TFL is pulling on the IT band, what's gonna happen? This is gonna pull too at the bottom. Make sense? I hope so. So what we want to do is strengthen the glute med, which is typically the least strongest muscle in the body, arguably, very, very weak. And we want to take this diagonal and we want to counter the force of the up and down TFL. I know you can hear that. Cool. Great. So we talked about all of that. I hope it makes sense. How can you tell if your glute med is not strong? I'll show you right now. She only does this when I'm recording. She never does this any other time. She does that a lot. It's cool. It's just my leather couch. It wasn't expensive or anything. Thank you. Good. I'm glad I rolled under the couch. Keep your hips stacked. You're gonna lift this leg, your top leg, up and back as high as you can, and you're gonna hold it. See if you can hold it for about 60 seconds. Chances are you probably can't. When you come out of it, you're just gonna go back down. Couple of things here. Your back is gonna wanna roll back because your glute med is gonna be pretty weak. It's gonna want some extra help. So try to stay perpendicular to the floor in your hips. And again, lift up and back. I can already feel this working really, really, really hard. So you're trying to isolate that muscle to build it. Now, when you want to strengthen it, this test becomes part of your workout, right? It becomes part of your mobility training. So you're just gonna do this, lift and hold, remember up and back, and then down. Try to do this 10 to 12 times. If you have a really weak glute med, this will probably wear you out. All right, the next thing you're gonna do, if you have a resistance band, and if you don't, fast forward to the other non-resistance band exercises. I don't typically like to include equipment in these videos because that assumes that you have the equipment to do this, but I do think that this was a really good one and I didn't want to exclude it just for that. So like I said, if you don't have one, fast forward or go out and buy them. They're not very expensive. The video that I watched that taught me this used one of those really long, thin ones that you could wrap around several times. Obviously, this is what I have, so this is what we're gonna use. So you're gonna take your band and wrap it around your knees. Step your feet wide, and then sitting up nice and tall, hips are at about a 90-degree angle. Try to get your knees over your ankles, and then back down. Open and close. About 10 times. This is all we're doing, trying to isolate through the glute med. Then, with your leg or their feet about the same distance, lean forward. So you're closing the gap in your hips below 90 degrees. You open and close. It gets harder as you do this. Again, 10 times. So 10, 10, 10 for these. Now, as you may have guessed, you gotta lean back, so more than 90, core is engaged, open and close. For most people, this is gonna be the harder one. So just keep that in mind as you go, 10 times. The last one that I found that I really liked was a clamshell squat. I'll show you. You're gonna take a towel and you're gonna fold it up. You're gonna put that towel against the wall at about knee level. And you're gonna push your knee against that towel, right? The goal is to keep the towel against the wall and sit nice and low in your squat. Push, push, push. So this teaches you really how to squat because you should be turning on your outer hips, glute med, sit nice and low, chest lifted, and back up. Knee stays against the wall. Lower and lift. Lower. You get it. Clamshell squats, both sides. That's where my towels go. Those plants aren't, those are fake. There's no way I could keep those plants alive. Are you kidding me? Once you've done your workout, we're gonna stretch. What does that look like? Great question. I'm really far away. Hi. So what you're gonna do is cross one foot over the other. So for this example, my right foot's over my left. You're gonna turn your chest to the right and then fold toward the right. to stretch out this side. And you can do the other side as well. Try not to fall like I did. Maybe grab something to lean onto to really isolate through this entire side body. Find that lateral flexion. You can even drive your hips in the opposite direction to really help open up that area. You can also just cross your legs and fold over that way. That helps open up the hamstrings a little bit as well. But the big thing to keep in mind here is that it's not so much the stretching that needs to happen, it's the building of the muscle around the IT band to help support the tendon itself. I'm gonna leave you with one last thing. Especially in the personal training world, we talk a lot about foam rolling and myofascial release, and it is fantastic. However, if you want to fix IT band syndrome, do not roll your IT band itself. Rolling on the side of your leg may only increase inflammation and make it worse. What we really want to do is foam roll the parts of the body that are tight and causing that lift that I talked about on, remember that lift on the distal connection to the knee of the IT band. This, I'm pointing, you can't see. Things to roll out. The TFL, that muscle in the front. Here's the picture again. Roll that out. You can also roll out the quad, so the front of the leg, right? I'm not going to talk about how to foam roll those areas because this is already too long, but you can look it up yourself. I'm going to post my sources like I have been for the past couple videos, or I might do a post about how to foam roll in general with specific areas later on, but if you're really curious, I recommend you do that. Note that if you're starting to work on the glute med, you might also feel that in your knee. So be very gentle with your body. Move mindfully, rest, ice, compression, elevation. Be gentle. Bye.